What's going on, everybody? Welcome into First Take on this Friday Eve. Thank you for spending part of your morning, afternoon, whatever it is with us. Stephen A. Smith, Max Kellerman. I'm Molly Karam Rose. How we doing, everybody?
How y'all doing?
I'm good.
Oh, you slipped that in. Nice. I like it.
The Rose?
Oh, yeah.
I am Mrs. Rose. Since we're
Indeed.
going with all those matriarch, all those terms, joking with me. All right, let's get it going, guys. Thursday night football. We have a good matchup when two 3-1 teams face off as the Rams travel to Seattle. We know those 12s are going to be live. LA fresh off a 55-40 debacle. And against Tampa, their star running back Todd Gurley hasn't been himself, while the Seahawks have had some too close for comfort games against teams without their starting quarterback. Seattle is favored by 1.5. Stephen A. Smith. We got a real game. I know how much you love Thursday night football. Who wins tonight?
I got the Seahawks winning the game tonight. I think it's a short week. I think the game is in Seattle, and I think that Russell Wilson has looked absolutely sensational. And I think the national audience, myself mainly, owes this man an apology. We've been talking about MVP candidates in terms of Patrick Mahomes. We talked about Lamar Jackson. Before he fell off against Cleveland last week. We talked about Dak Prescott. Obviously, we have not talked about Russell Wilson, who has completed about 97 of 133 or 94, something like that, for 133 attempts. 72.9% completion percentage. Over 1,100 yards passing, 8 touchdowns, not a single interception. And unlike the previous 2 weeks, Seattle got back to their running game last week. Chris Carson ran the ball about 22 times, 104 yards. This is what they do. They run the football effectively. They move the chains. They wear you down. They make sure they don't have their defense out on the field for an exorbitant amount of time. We know that when they are out there, they can do some things if they're rested and ready to go. I'm just of the mindset that when you look at this being a short week, being in Seattle, combined with how Los Angeles has looked defensively, you gave up 55 points to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 55 points on your home turf to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I know Mike Evans is special. Jameis Winston has looked good with Byron Leftwich and Bruce Arians. I get that. But 55 points, there is a problem with that defense. They've got to get it fixed. And not only that, there's an incredible imbalance. You ran the football about 11 times. Jared Goff threw the football about, 68 times, for crying out loud? You can't have that. You can't have that. So they're going to try to get back and find themselves, but this ain't the week to find yourself. A short week on the road in Seattle. Everything points to Seattle winning a close game in this situation.
Yep, that was my first thought, too. But I think actually the Rams are going to pull it off. Look, if Gurley's not right, that's why Jared Goff throws the ball so much, right? Like, if Gurley's not right, Jared Goff is maybe a system quarterback, and the play action with Gurley really changes the whole dynamic of that offense. And if you take that away, okay, granted, that's not great. And I totally agree about Russell Wilson. By the way, I bring this up religiously, as you would say. The year Cam won the MVP, you know who the best player in the second half of that season was? Russell Wilson. You can see so many years where that was the case, where this guy won the MVP, but over this half a season, Russell Wilson was an MVP candidate in this season. He's a Hall of Fame quarterback in his prime. And yes, they're at home, and yes, it's a short week. But you know what I noticed this season so far, Stephen A? The desperate team seems to be winning these games. That includes Thursday night football. And you called one when you took the Eagles over the Packers on the road, short week, looking bad the week before. I think if you really look at Seattle, and they were one of my sleeper teams this year, but if you really look at Seattle, while Russell Wilson has looked good, the team really hasn't. Think of what they won by the skin of their teeth against Cincinnati week 1. Cincinnati's awful. You just said the other day, if it wasn't for the Dolphins, right? Cincinnati or maybe Washington, they're awful. And yet, Russell Wilson, by the skin of his teeth, who have they really beaten up on? They're barely beating teams, barely, and that's with Russell Wilson playing this well. Now you have a Rams team who's coming off a season where they went to a Super Bowl, who's been Gurley can't be used any less or play any worse than he has already. He's likely to play better than that. Goff has been pedestrian at best. This is a desperate team. Road teams this year, Thursday Night Football, for whatever reason, have played over their heads. I like the Rams in an upset.
Well, I will say this to you. Number one, they didn't barely beat Arizona. That was 27-10. That's number one. Even though
they didn't look good, though.
They didn't look that great, but, Arizona, they can do that to you from time to time just with what Kingsbury is doing. But they're just not that effective right now. We know that. But in the end, what it comes down to is this. Again, you got this kid, Chris Carson, is averaging nearly 4 yards a carry. You got Russell Wilson playing lights out. You got a defense that is always respectable, and nothing's changed this year. And they're at home in a short week. And then you've got a Ram team that I think they've got identity issues. Clearly, they're trying to save Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley is not 100%. We all know it. And they know their best shot at winning the chip is to get him to the postseason healthy, because clearly that wasn't the case with him last year. So you got to pay attention to that as well. But then I look at their defense. Their defense hasn't been that great, but 6th against the run, 16th rather against the pass. It's one of those situations where if you're the Rams, you might think, okay, this is a team that we can throw on. But again, that noise in Seattle is going to be a factor, particularly for somebody like Goff. So again, and then when we talk about the desperation, don't compare the Eagles to anybody in this game. Both teams are 3-1. I know San Francisco is undefeated. They had a bye week last week at 3-0, and so they're now elevated themselves within the division. But both teams are 3-1. The Philadelphia Eagles were 1-2. Had they lost that game, and Dallas had beaten New Orleans 3 days later because the Eagles had played on Thursday night, the Dallas Cowboys would have had a 3-game lead on them, and they almost assuredly would have won the division. The Eagles would have been done. So the level of desperation that the Eagles were facing last Thursday is not what the Rams nor the Seahawks are facing now.
The Rams are coming off a Super Bowl appearance.
Yeah.
They're now in a division with not only the Seahawks, but for a long time, that was all you had to worry about. And now all of a sudden you look up and you just mentioned it. San Francisco's 3-0. Mm-hmm. And by the way, the odds makers seem to like them. Like, people are saying, no, they're actually quite good. This is not a mirage.
We'll see.
There's a chance the Rams don't go back to the playoffs. They're aware of this. Mm-hmm. And this is a team, let's not forget, as recently as the middle of last season, we were asking, is this a super team, a dynastic kind of greatest show on turf team? Mm-hmm. Intrinsically also, the Rams are very, very good. Gurley changes that dynamic if he's not healthy. But they had, as again, recently as last season, 3 MVP candidates legit on the same team. Let's say 2/3 of the way through the year. You could look at Jared Goff, you could look at Aaron Donald, obviously, and you could look at Todd Gurley. I think what they're doing with Gurley now is a kind of version of load management like we saw in the NBA with Kawhi Leonard this last season.
Which he's not happy about, by the way.
Hoping that they will get to the playoffs. And by the way, look what happened to the offense in the Super Bowl last year when Gurley was clearly compromised. Not the same. And so what we've seen so far from the Rams is a very cautious approach with Gurley. I think the handcuffs come off a little bit for a game like this. I think the Rams score the upset.
Remember that the 49ers, we'll learn a lot more about them this Sunday when they go up against Cleveland.
No question.
That's number one. And number two, their very next game after Cleveland is the Los Angeles Rams. So remember, the Rams got two bites at the apple. They got Seattle this Thursday, and then their very next game is against the 49ers. We'll see.
Who would you say that the Seahawks looked great against?
I wouldn't say they looked great against anybody.
Russell Wilson, 8 TDs, no picks. Only
Russell
him
Wilson,
and Patrick Mahomes.
But here's my
Russell
retort.
Wilson looks great, I agree.
Here's my retort to that. Even in their prime, even when the Legion of Boom was around, there were many, many games with the Seahawks that were always close. They weren't the type of team that blew you out. They were the type of team that beat you down. And this team right now, thus far, looks like the kind of team that will beat you down.
And we know home field advantage will matter. Those 12s playing up there at the link. Seattle has won 8 straight Thursday night football games, longest active streak in the NFL. Can we please talk about my New York football Giants still to come? Should Giants fans be afraid that Saquon Barkley will be rushed back too soon? We'll debate that. Stephen A., what else you got for the people?
Always got a huge show coming your way right here on First Take.